As I said in the introduction, some important changes are coming with Bootstrap 4. So in this video, I want to quickly overview those changes. Some of the things that I mention in this video will spawn entire videos devoted to a given topic. And so we'll just merely introduce those ideas here and then expand on them a little bit later on. Now, admittedly, this video will probably mean more to you after you have a little bit more Bootstrap experience under your belt. You might want to come back later, near to the end of this course, and review this video just, again, as a reminder of the things that are changing. As we go through this course together, I'm going to make sure to point out the changes between Bootstrap version 3 and Bootstrap version 4, again, so that you can understand the scope of changes between the two. You never know when you may need to go back and maintain applications that were built using Bootstrap version 3. Now, many of the biggest changes in Bootstrap 4 are what I would call under the hood. In other words, how Bootstrap is actually being implemented and written and maintained. So we've already talked about this a couple of times, how the creators of Bootstrap are moving from the less CSS processor to the Sass CSS processor to get a little bit more programming power behind them. The specific reasons behind this move has to do with some of those features that are available in Sass that aren't available in Less. And overall, there's been this large debate, I guess you could say, in designer and developer circles about the features in Less versus the features in Sass. And I can't do that topic justice here, so you probably should just open up bing.com and search for Less versus Sass and read a couple of the articles there. But I want to assure you, from a beginner's perspective, it's really not all that important, and there's no under the hood details that really you need to be concerned about all that much. Just know that there is some huge changes that are coming that really probably don't affect you as you're getting started with Bootstrap. All right, so what's changing? Well, first of all, obviously the change from Less to Sass. We've talked about that a couple of times already. And I think that the move to Sass is supposed to facilitate the utilization of variables in Sass for things like colors and sizes and so on, to make global customizations across the entire framework. This also includes the ability to create customizable media query breakpoints. And then the next big change has to do with how sizes are being defined in Bootstrap. In the past, the designers of Bootstrap used pixels and ems to specify sizes of things, whether it be fonts or spacing or whatever the case might be. And they're moving to a new unit of measure called rems that will allow you to create relative sizes. And the hope is that this would aid in creating responsive resizing of the type and spacing and everything based on the media query. There's also a new breakpoint that's been added. So in Bootstrap 3, there were 4 media query breakpoints. There will be a 5th media query breakpoint. They're adding a new one called XL. But honestly, all they're really doing is adding a new size, renaming the XS size, giving it this new value, and then pushing all the other ones out, making the largest one that was formerly just large to XL now. All right. So again, we'll devote one or more entire video topics to the breakpoints and the grid system. There's also the idea of this of reboot. So in the past, the Bootstrap's creators have used the normalize.css, a popular normalization script, to kind of reset all the styles across all different browser versions so that you can then begin to build styles on top of it with a solid foundation. And so they're moving now to Reboot, which is taking normalize.css and then adding on some Bootstrap features as well. We'll talk about that later, but that's going to be a change from the previous versions that just use normalize.css. And then the bootstrap.js is being rewritten using ECMA script, or I call it ECMAScript 2015. And even if you're using an older browser that doesn't support ECMAScript 2015, they're going to allow you to use those features using babel.js. All right, so now let's talk about some of the new items that are that are going to be included. And we've already mentioned the optional Flexbox support. So Flexbox is a new CSS standard that allows a parent container, like a div control, to dictate the width and the height of child containers. So other div controls inside of the parent div control, for example. And a canonical usage of Flexbox is equal height columns. So you have a different amount of information in 3 different divs that are all contained within a parent. How do you make them all equal heights? Well, Flexbox will help with that and more. So we'll talk about Flexbox a little bit later. There's also the feature called cards, and cards are replacing in version 3 panels and wells, and it gives you a lot of additional options like titles, descriptions, and even buttons underneath the card itself. There have been improvements made to forms and tooltips through the use of an additional JavaScript library. We'll talk about that later. There are also new utility classes that are available for things like spacing. So you'll see these m-t-0, for example, or here, p-a-3. What is this sorcery? Okay. It's utility classes for margin and padding. So you can say, for example, margin top, set it to 0, or margin left, set it to 1. And these values are actually in rems, which I just briefly mentioned a moment ago, relative ems, relatively sized ems. So this is going to take a little bit of explanation. We'll come back to that a little bit later. There are also some new display headers. We already looked at an example of that in the second video when we used the display-4. There's display 1 through 4. We'll talk about these in their own video. And there's also a new responsive embed aspect ratio. So if you need something more cinema-like instead of 16 by 9, I think there's a movie-like, whatever that is, 20 by something, that's available. There's a page called Migration that talks about some of the changes that are coming and what you need to do to make those changes. And we'll reference this as we go through this series. This is not a complete list, but it's growing. But at any rate, hopefully that's a pretty good overview of the types of things that are going to be changing. And now let's just start diving in and talking about the grid system and then how to utilize some of these new features. So we'll start that in the next lesson. We'll see you there. Thanks.